Hey y'all, Michelle Raza here with Finding Yourself SATX Life Coaching, helping you find your best self since 2017. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Today's October 29th, 2022. And so before we go ahead and get started, I want to announce the raffle winner from last video. Last video we covered when we don't want to communicate. Today we're going to continue covering Eve Rickert and Franklin Veaux's book, More Than Two, A Practical Guide to Ethical Polyamory. So we've talked about passive communication, triangular communication, when we don't want to communicate. And now today we'll talk about coercive communication. Before we get started, I want to announce the raffle winner from the last video. So it's Baby T 1230. If you're watching, please contact me. Go to my website, www.findingyourselfsatx.com. There you can see my contact information to claim your prize, which is a free digital coaching package from our company. And for those of you that are interested in entering in this video's raffle, also go to the website, enter just by emailing me your information. It's a random raffle, so whoever contacts me, you have a great chance of getting a digital coaching package for free. There have been previous sessions where I've given away a couple. Really just want to get the materials out there and help as many people as possible. So look forward to hearing from you guys. Without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. Just give me 1 second to swap out my books here. Okay, so without going too much into detail, just want to cover high level. Passive communication is when you don't directly state your needs. And so that makes it very difficult for somebody else. It's kind of like expecting them to read your mind. And we did talk about how in some cultures that's the norm. The passive communication is the norm. And so it's this very delicate dance that you learn with time, how to ask a question without being too overt, and maybe being considered impolite in that culture. And so what these authors say is essentially that they're writing this book for a North American audience where it's pretty much a hodgepodge or a mishmash of cultures. And so you can't assume that the other person is going to understand your subtle cues because they may not be from the same culture that you are. And so using direct communication is just a more guaranteed way to get your needs met, especially in an intimate or romantic relationship. And then also for dealing with someone. So if you're communicating directly and you're dealing with someone who does not communicate directly, the best way to deal with it, from what these authors state, is to not read into anything that they're saying and refuse to play the game and only respond to the surface words. It'll make the indirect communicator very frustrated, and they will eventually have to state their needs using words. So I think it's worth talking about with your partner, making sure that you both want to communicate directly, and then helping each other communicate directly and catch each other whenever you're doing those passive aggressive type behaviors that you might have just been raised with. I think a lot of us were. So that's passive communication. Triangular communication is when instead of talking to the person that you're upset with or have a problem with, you talk to somebody else. And that starts from childhood, right? When siblings run to the parents and say, "Hey, Mom, Susie took an extra spoonful of my cereal," or whatever it is. You're asking somebody else to resolve your issue, a third person to resolve your issue. And in some cases, right, when couples go to couples counseling, that's kind of what you're asking the couples counselor to do. But what the couples counselor, the therapist, is going to teach you is to instead communicate directly with each other and resolve your issues. So triangular communication is something that we really want to avoid. When we don't want to communicate, so pretty much what the authors state here is when you don't want to communicate about something with someone, when it makes you nervous, that's exactly when you should communicate with that person about that thing. So just keep that in mind. And then lastly, today we'll talk about coercive communication. This is page 95 of their book on my copy. Coercion doesn't always involve physical violence or direct threats. It's actually quite easy for relationships to become coercive when the stakes are high and when we are deeply attached or committed to another person. They are high. Coercion happens anytime you make the consequences of saying no so great that you've removed reasonable choice. A subtle sort of coercion arises anytime you believe that your partner owes you something. For example, if you think your partner owes you intimacy and you are just expressing your feelings about what you're owed, then there's a good chance that you're being coercive. If your partner says no and you start preparing for a fight instead of accepting their choice, you're probably being coercive. If your partner sets a boundary or says no to a request, he or she probably has a good reason. That reason might not even be about you. It's important to respect a no, even when you don't understand it. Show appreciation for your partner's self-advocacy and self-knowledge. Be grateful for the intimacy he or she has shown you, and make it clear that you respect their autonomy and ability to make choices, even if you don't understand what's happening or why. We're talking about boundaries your partner sets on his or herself, which, as we discuss in chapters 9 and 10, are quite different from rules they place on you. It is always appropriate to negotiate things another person places on you, though sometimes it takes careful attention to recognize the difference. It's also possible that in setting boundaries, a partner is being manipulative, using boundary setting as a way to coerce you. Withdrawal and silence, classic techniques of emotional blackmail, can initially be difficult to distinguish from healthy boundary setting. A person could be withdrawing just to punish you, but that doesn't change what you should do. The solution is never to try to force someone to do something they don't want to do. Thank them and respect their choice. If you can't respect their choice, it's time for you to examine your own boundaries. So there's more to the chapter. They go into a few more details, but stuff that kind of pertains more just specifically to polyamorous relationships. So I won't dive too much into there. This book is definitely worth a read. I think it's really important to understand all of us are in multiple relationships. Not all of us are in multiple romantic relationships, but we're all juggling multiple relationships all the time. And so the tips in this book are really, really helpful to make it clear where the responsibility lies. So one of the things that they talk about, it's kind of cool, it's called a pivot partner. And so in polyamory, the pivot partner is, if it's, just take for example, so it's a man that has two women that he's dating. And in ethical non-monogamy or polyamory, everyone is open about it and okay with it. In theory, right? Okay with it in theory, because you can't, like, jealousy is not something that you turn off. That man that has both of those female partners is the pivot partner. Now, when you talk about multiple relationships that are not romantic, one of the things that Dr. Gottman talks about as a recurring conflict that's quite common is the conflict between a man, his wife, and his mother. So oftentimes the wife and the mother don't like each other, and the man is kind of stuck in the middle. And so if you take, I always forget their name, sorry. If you take Franklin Veaux and Eve Rickert's tips about being the pivot partner, that's essentially what role the man is playing in that relationship between his mom and his wife. He's not sleeping with both of them. It's different than polyamory, but he's still the pivot partner. The thing that they have in common is him. And so instead of the mom and the wife hating each other, they need to lean on the husband and son to make sure that both women are getting their needs met. And so it's just very, very interesting to look at it from that perspective. If you're getting your needs met, then there's no reason why you should hate your mother-in-law also having needs, or vice versa. If your son is doing what he needs to do for you as a mother, then there's no reason why you should have any problems with the daughter-in-law. So interesting stuff. I think it's very, very much worth a read, whether you're just curious about the subject in general or interested in the multiple relationships that we all have to juggle. So coercive communication, it's very interesting. It's very interesting how, I think coercive communication is a form of indirect or passive communication. So when you have to kind of blackmail or threaten, you're afraid of directly asking for what you want or what you need, because then you might hear a no. And then if someone does hear a no, if you try to coerce them or guilt them, one of the things that a friend of mine has talked about in the past is the concept of fog, fear, obligation, and guilt. If you're doing something for someone based out of fear, obligation, or guilt, most likely it's not a healthy dynamic or relationship that you have. And so if you're trying to make someone do something based off of fear, obligation, or guilt, you might want to examine the relationship and what it is that you're doing. And I mean, you can get someone to comply by force, but you can't earn their respect that way. And in a romantic relationship especially, I mean, you want both of you to want to be there. And so if you're having to force or coerce someone in any way, then they don't want to be there. And so, I mean, I would just ask myself what it is that you want. Do you want someone to pretend? Because they can toe the line and they can do what you asked, but that's not real. So what are you doing? But anyway, next time when we meet, we will talk about Melody Beattie's Codependent No More. We'll be moving on to chapter 18, talking high level about the 12 steps. I highly recommend that you pick up that book as well as this one, as well as all the other books that I've talked about, Dr. Lindsay Gibson, Dr. John Gottman. If you're interested in our raffle, so we're giving away a free digital coaching package every 2 weeks. Please check out my website, www.findingyourselfsatx.com. Look at the details section of this video to figure out how to enter the raffle as well. Please do like and subscribe. It really does help us little YouTubers. Also, Melody Beattie's publisher contacted me. He just sent me her latest updated work for Codependent No More. And he said that if I want to include that as a bundle in the raffle, that I totally can. So excited about that. He's given me 5 copies of the book to give away. So when you enter the raffle, just go ahead and state that you're interested in Melody's book as well as the digital coaching package. And we'll see. Best of luck to you, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. All right. Thank you. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.